Let's talk about channels for a moment. From the previous videos, you know that human eyes generally have 3 color receptors, the red, green, and blue, which allows us to perceive a wide range of colors. Some people are missing a receptor or 2. They're still able to perceive beautiful, beautiful things in the world. And a handful of people actually have a 4th receptor and can perceive colors that we are incapable of perceiving on average. Additionally, sometimes when people have an artificial lens replace their organic lens on their eye when they have to have surgery for that, they'll actually see into the ultraviolet range. It turns out that we're capable of seeing that, but the lens itself that we are born with blocks that and prevents that from going in. So just some interesting facts about science and people. So I'm going to build a quick window here, and I'm going to show you something that you may not think of. And again, I have legacy things set up, but it's the same sort of jazz. I'm just going to make a 7-inch by 7-inch 300 resolution, pixel per inch resolution. And that means it may have been a while since you've worked with Photoshop, that means for each square inch on the screen, we're going to have 300 by 300 pixels inside of that. Now, the question that I get asked from time to time from people is, how big is a pixel? And that becomes a bit tricky. In this case, we have 300 of them per square inch, but that's not really how big they are. If you talk to an engineer, they'll be aggravated and say, oh, well, a lot of people will claim that a pixel is a representation on your screen, but that's not really the case. That's just the hardware that's representing the pixel. We're not going to get that fine grain into it. In our case, we're going to say that a pixel has 2 aspects: the physical aspect, which is your monitor or your tablet or anything that's producing visual effect. So if you had a large building and you wanted to turn on and off lights inside that building so that it made shapes like a heart, for example, then voila, you just turn off most of them and then turn on a few of them, and eventually you get a heart shape depending on the lights you have on, like in that famous movie, Hey Hey. That would mean each window is essentially a pixel, but the other side of that is how much information is in that pixel. In that case, the light would just be an on or off case, and you'd either have the light or no light, and that's it. And that works fine for sides of buildings, things like that, but we're going to be a little bit more advanced than that. So the term pixel means picture element. That's where they get the word. So our picture element is going to be set to RGB color for the mode and 8 bits. And this is just the standard that we're going to be using. That means that each channel that we have, red, green, and blue, will have 8 bits of information. And that means it's time to break out the calculator again. Boom. Hello, calculator. So if we were to go in, a bit is just an on or off state, like that light switch. And the previous video I showed you guys went over something similar, but in case you didn't get a chance to watch these videos in order or you've forgotten already, this is just a quick review. If we're to bring up a bit to a power, and in this case, I'm going to need the scientific calculator instead of the standard calculator to get the power. We have 2 states, but we have 8 of these 2 states. How many combinations are there? 256. And if you're into computers as a hobby or you're getting your degree in computer science, you'll recognize this pretty quickly. It's the sort of number you'll see in memory because it's a base 2 system. Like 256 gigabytes, for example, could come up a lot on hard drives. It's because it's base 2 type stuff. So what does this mean? Each channel will have, the red, green, and blue, each channel will have 256 potential values going from off, 0, to on, 255. It starts at 0, so it doesn't go up to 256. That's a lot of talking. Let's see what this actually looks like. I'm going to do one odd thing. I'm not going to start with everything on as white. I'm going to start it all off with black. Boom. Voila. We have one layer here, but over on channels, we have the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel, and the composite channel, which is RGB. You can access these pretty quickly. 2 will get you to the RGB, and we'll select everything. Control 3 will get you to the red channel. Control 4, the green channel. Control 5 will get you the blue channel. So, why do we have access to these? All kinds of reasons. In this case, and we'll build up to that over time. But first, on each channel, we have a certain number of values. Like I said, 255. What does that mean? Let's look at that. Let's grab the gradient, and we'll go from black to white. In other words, from off, 0 to on, 255. We'll just go across. Boom. That's what I mean. These are the shades that we have, value-wise, just black and white. But when we put it on the red channel, it's the intensity of red. If we were to instead have this on the green channel, undo real quick, we would have the intensities of green. And if we were to do this on the blue channel, and notice I'm undoing between these two so that I don't build them all up just yet, we have the intensities of blue. So what happens, I undid it on each of them, but what happens if we just start grabbing them? Ooh, we start getting different colors. And that's because, as we saw in the Colorful Notions video, it's the difference between channels that creates color. So in this case, these are all going in different directions, so we get a huge number of colors going on. I think that's quite beautiful. This is all in one layer. And if we were to create a new layer, and again fill it with black, which is 0, everything's off, and we were to go to the red channel with a big old brush, I have caps locks on, I suppose, brush, here we go, set it to absolutely on, and again, if I were to double click the color picker, take a look at this, red, green, and blue, 255, 255, 255. Okay, go ahead. Click once on the red channel. I'm sorry, I have a soft brush, I need a hard brush. Easy way to get that. If I hold down the Alt key and right click with the mouse, I can drag down to make it harder, drag up to make it softer. And this is if I have the brush tool selected. I can drag right to make it larger, left to make it smaller. So Alt key, right, click, and drag. Very useful with the brush tool. I'm going to go ahead and click once, and look at that bright, bright, bright red. Beautiful. Click once on the green channel. Beautiful. Oh, and look, there's that yellow. These are the color combinations that we would expect in an additive color system. So if you've done traditional painting or markers or crayon or any of those things, you're used to a subtractive color system, which is the usual one that you're taught, which is blue, red, and yellow to mix all the colors. And if you've had your color and design class already, or even some more advanced art classes in high school, or if you love watching YouTube videos on art or light or physics, or if you just love to read that stuff, you may have noticed that people will tend to say magenta, cyan, and yellow. Same sort of thing in your printer. And those are actually the colors that will reproduce better with subtractive, because there are a few colors you can't quite get with just standard red. So we've got all of those going on as our secondary instead of our primary, because we're in the additive color system. So we have a different mixture going in. So a lot of the things you know for your subtractive color, where the light is being absorbed by the pigment and the rest is being reflected back at you, is different in the additive color, where we actually have a projector, in this case your monitor, lighting up with big, beautiful colors. So some of the things that you would intuitively know, like what happens if you mix red and green together in a subtractive system, those are opposites. They would become duller and duller until you get a gray or a brown, depending on the base pigments inside of it. Not so in the additive system. Red and green make yellow. So if you get really interested in that, you can Google the additive color wheel and take a look at that. Whoops. Wheel. I mistyped all kinds of stuff there. Hold on. Additive color wheel. And you start getting some really cool stuff happening. And you can watch a lot of videos on the principles of mixing color versus additive color and all that good stuff. It's quite fun. Great history to that. For the interested reader, all kinds of fantastic things come out of just this quick Google search, but we're not going to worry about that for now. This is essentially, though, what we have happening inside of an 8-bit system. We have a considerable number of colors available to us according to the shades that we have. Let me quickly demonstrate that, and then we'll move on to our next video. Hopping back over to channels while I'm still in layer 1. And notice that if I break channels palette off, the channels is essentially what you're looking at. A little side note here. So if we were to create a just standard brush stroke on a new layer, it will be in those channels. The channels are a composite of the layers rather than the individual layer. So make sure that you have, when you're working in channels, make sure you have the layer you want, or rather the visuals you want active so you can see what's going on. So turn on those layers, select that layer, simplify things that way. All right, so if we were to just make these duller, and I'm going to double click the white square here because that's the one on the top, that's my active color. I'm going to drag down on the left here, and notice that the brightness right here will be changing up and down. If I set it to exactly half, I get halfway between 0 and 255, which is 127. Because it's gray, it's the same across the board. In other words, there's no hue, there's no saturation. And real quick, what is hue, what is saturation? Well, we have three different ways. We have three different coordinates, shall we say, to look at this. We have this coordinate, which is going left to right on the square. We have this coordinate, which is going up and down. And then we have this bar, which is an additional coordinate so that we can pick things. A lot of people never play with this. That bar is your hue, and you can change that to be saturation instead. Notice that now it's how bright something is or how dark something is. Or your brightness, which is, notice it's like white, like how intense things are or how dull things are. So there's a difference between saturation, which is how saturated it is, and brightness, which is essentially how bright it is. And you can see those by clicking on it. Now the other two settings, the second one, in this case, if it's on saturation, hue goes across, brightness goes up and down. If you have it in brightness, hue still goes across, but now saturation goes up and down. And if you have it on hue, saturation goes across and brightness goes up and down. So these are just different ways of selecting colors, and these can actually be really useful if you're digitally painting, because you also have red, where you have the red and the green. You have the red in the hue bar, and then you have green and blue. You have green, where you have green in your sidebar here, and then you have red and blue. And then you have blue, where you have blue in the sidebar, and then you have red, green. So why would this be useful if you're painting? Because if you want to make something cooler or warmer, you can actually pop into the red or the green or the blue, and if you had a color, you could increase the warmth or the coolness, which is great, because if you're just over in your standard hue saturation, finding a cooler color in here, you might wiggle around in the hue, but that's not necessarily what you want. You may want to change the brightness, whatever. Anyway, just a little side note there. Fun stuff. As I was saying, I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk about the color picker, so I wanted to say now when we're going through. As I was saying, if we go to the standard layout and we just drag this down till the brightness is set to 50%, just gonna put this in 0. You usually get 127, but you may also get 128 because it's a weird number. 127 and 128 is about the middle on this because it starts on the 0. Okay, tell it okay. I'm going to use a smaller brush. I'm using the square brackets this time to shrink my brush. Left makes it smaller, right makes it bigger, or sorry, the left bracket makes it smaller, the right square bracket makes it bigger on the keyboard. Oops. Notice I have the gray, which is great. If I'm on the red, boom, I have a duller red. If I'm on the green, boom, I have a duller green and a duller yellow. And if I'm on the blue, boom, I have a dull blue. And sure enough, notice that instead of the white, when all of the colors are added together in the additive color system, we get the white, we get a 50% gray. And we can double check that. If I click over here, sure enough, brightness is 100%, brightness is 50%. That's exactly what we got. That's what I expected. That's phenomenal. Now, what would happen though if we were in red and we changed the brightness to something much brighter? We should get some new colors. And sure enough, notice this color in the center instead of white. I'm just going to double click this there. We get this pink. And if we go over to the green and we pick a different value going in, and just a heads up, if you're curious, if you're in the green channel and you take like this blue, it won't matter because it's just going to take the essentially the gray of it. And then I'm going to click there. Look at that. We're getting a completely different color. Fun times. So this is how you slide around and get those colors. And this makes sense. This is what Colorful Notions was saying. Double-click the hand tool to resize this so that everything fits. Actually going to zoom out one more time. And so essentially that's your channels with one caveat. This is also where alpha channels go. An alpha channel is another name for a mask. So let's talk about masks in the next video.